大家好, I guess it's Janae and welcome back to my channel, and today we are continuing with our read along for ErHa volume 8, and I don't know why my voice has been fine up until this point, and now it feels like I have a voice box, and that's not normal. So let me just quickly cough, sorry about that. Weird. I hope that's gone now. Okay, I have coffee here with me just to smooth things over, and we are going to be busy for 2 hours. If you're new here, hi! And yeah, we take a break on the hour for 10 minutes, then we come back and we finish it off. Hi! I wanted to get my things to officially show them off on stream, and I do not have them with me. But thank you so much again for sending them. I really love it, and Juliet is enjoying her snacks. Okay, sorry, sidetrack. Yeah, so if you are here new, I'm Janae, I read Danmei, and that's all the order of business, I think. And for anyone who has their own copy that they're following along with, we were at the top of page 194. Yes, maybe I'll go get it during a break. Then I can just quickly show it off. But yeah, okay. I don't wanna let's just wait one more minute, just in case there are people who still need to get the notification, because I know I am a little bit late. And then I think we can just immediately start. I am also just on my own time reading Case File of Julia Richards. I feel like I keep mentioning it, but it's my comfort read after I've read this. And if Potential by Disaster was a modern day book, but Potential Clueless by Disaster was a modern day book, that would be it. Welcome to the Cozy Cat Stew. I hope you enjoyed that. Okay, I think we can get started. So we were busy with Moran, and by extension his mom and the friend's tragic backstory, and I am assuming that something is gonna happen that will sabotage his mom's friend's escape from the brothel, and he will retaliate by burning down said brothel. But let's wait and see. Shin Fengruo wasn't worried. She'd already earned lavish sums for the House of Drunken Jade. Only 150,000 gold left, she said to Moran with a smile. Little Renard, once your Jiji earns enough, I'll be able to buy my freedom. Jiji will take you somewhere nice. Moran had been sent to work in the kitchen and saw her very rarely. The madam was intent on keeping her workers from commiserating, so Shifengruo and Moran always met covertly. She reached out and pinched his cheek, then handed him a sweet. Shh, take this. Too bad I can't give you any money. Mother's too sharp with that. Moran gave her a gap-toothed grin. Thank you, Shinjie. But then the madam knew just as well as Shinfengruo did that her star was a mere 150,000 gold away from freedom. Though she looked unconcerned, deep down she was terrified. If they lost Shinfengruo, the House of Drunken Jade's profits would plummet. She was determined to get one last payout from Shinfengruo before Shinfengruo left her. There was no shortage of wealthy clients who wanted Shinfengruo. Any of their bids would be enough to keep the madam in luxury for the rest of her life. Straight to hell with you. I don't like where this is going. Thus the woman hatched a plan. She made an agreement with one of the richest merchants in the city. During the Lantern Festival, when Chunfeng was playing music in the hall, the madam served her a cup of drugged tea and brought her to her room. I was not expecting potential rape in this chapter, though I feel like with ErHa, you should just go into every chapter potentially expecting it, but still. That night, Moran had carefully prepared a bowl of tangyuan, which he carried to the inner room for Xunjie. The sound of horse panting stopped him at the threshold. Stunned, Moran pushed open the door and was hit in the face with the smell of resin incense, so thick it turned his stomach. In the darkness, he saw a greasy merchant with spit dangling from his mouth and his lapels hanging open, gasping atop a weakly struggling Xinfeng. I'm happy for your sake that you get to skip past this when you're doing the rewatch, because we're in the middle of a not so pleasant scene, to say the least. Bowl of Tingyuan crashed to the ground as Moran darted inside. With preternatural strength, he'd always been powerful. He knocked the merchant off her. Keeping the man pinned, he yelled at the stunned and sobbing Xin Fengru. Jijie, run! But run! I can't go. I have to keep him down. If you stay, we're both doomed when the madam comes. Run! Run! Don't worry, I'll be right behind you. Sun Fengru was his savior. Moran wanted her to flee Xiangtan and never come back. That day, he finally got to play the hero. Sun Fengru made him a final tearful bow and ran, but Moran was not so lucky. The madam came upstairs as soon as she heard the clamor, whereupon she found Moran had not only beaten up an important client, but also let their star performer escape. She nearly spat blood in anger, her features twisted in an angry mask. Of course, she's not going to reflect in any way that if she had just left well enough alone, this wouldn't have happened. She's just going to blame everyone else for it. Okay. Sorry. The madam had a son about Moran's own age, a boy who was malicious by nature. Seeing his mother furious, he came up with an idea both naive and cruel, in the way only children could be. Because Moran had angered his mother, the boy punished a fellow child like an animal. He found a dog kennel and ordered someone to lock Moran inside. Would that child happen to be the real, Moguye? The kennel was narrow and cramped. Moran could only crouch, unable to either lie down or stand up. They fed him table scraps like a dog and left him like that for 7 days. For 7 days, Moran was trapped in Xinfengruo's old room. The haze of the incense and the stink of a man's sweat mingled in his nose, inescapable. He crouched, stooped over, breathed in the syrupy miasma, wanting to puke for 7 whole days. After this incident, he developed an aversion to the scent of incense, a fear etched into his very bones. I appreciate that that was addressed. I didn't think it was going to be addressed. I thought it was just a character quirk. Huh. I mean, I actually kind of would have preferred it if it was just a character quirk, because then there didn't need to be trauma attached to it, but sure. Okay, chapter 260, The Furnace of Life. None of the cultivators in Loyalty Hall knew what to say. Many had lowered their heads, incapable of speech. Ah, bitter fate, said Master Shenjing. So much bitter fate. Every bitterness has its source. Every grievance has its cause. Much of the world is linked through action and consequence, harm and retribution, said Moran. Here she changed her tone. But Moran, you must know that suffering does not justify venting your resentment on others. Were you gonna keep that energy for the people who wanted to kill Moran just now because of the suffering that they had gone through? Because I do agree with her, but it feels like they're picking and choosing just a little bit. I don't know. Maybe I'm too biased. Of course not. An elder of Huahuang Pavilion sighed, Mo Xianjun, the trials you went through are certainly worthy of pity, but they were the result of your poor birth and unfortunate fate. Everyone has their own path to walk. You cannot terrorize other people simply because you yourself were terrorized. You've done good and suffered harm, but based on what we know, you also killed. All things must be accounted for. This time it was not Moran but Jiang Xi who responded. How so? Um, who can account for it all? Whose lives are considered worthy of praise and who should be condemned? Who can be that fairest arbiter? See, this is why I like Jiang Xi. Okay, sorry, focus. Jiang Xi was strong and willful. He'd never considered those of Tinyan Pavilion to be gods. I don't intend to be partial towards Moran, but I want to ask a question. We stand here today declaring we want to settle things with Moran, that we want to make him pay. Then what about what Moran has suffered? What about the injustices he's been made to bear? No one had imagined that Jiang Xi, who had endured the heaviest losses during the slaughter of Guyu, would be the one to speak up on Mo Weiye's behalf. They looked at him wide-eyed. Jiang Jiangmen, Tinian Pavilion has always been fair, said Muyani. My tribe has guarded the divine scales of justice for generations. When the time comes, we will use the scales to measure his sins and virtues before ascertaining his punishment. You needn't worry. I'm very curious to see how that works out, considering that when he was in the underworld, those scales measured him and found him to be good. I feel like I'm growing increasingly fond of Jiang Xi. Um, sorry. What does he have to do with me? Why would I be worried? Jiang Xi replied. Tianyan Pavilion irritated him to no end. His sect upheld the power of medicine. They believed any mortal man could live forever as long as an elixir was refined with enough sophistication. Guyu had never held any superstitions regarding these descendants of gods. But I am curious, he narrowed his almond eyes, voice cold. Once you've finished Moran's trial, shouldn't Tinyan Pavilion look for the others involved? Shouldn't you scour the earth and check whether Nangonglian is still among the living? Shouldn't you go off to Xiangtan in search of that merchant who debased Mission? If it's right for Moran to pay for murder with his life, then what about the time he was locked in a cage, beaten, or forced into penniless famine? His savior disgraced and his mother starved to death. Who will be punished for these crimes? Zhang Zhenmen, mumbled Master Xuanjin. Why do you speak for a criminal? I mean, it's a fair question. Like, are they just gonna punish Moran and then let Shimei wander free because he's not a convenient person to investigate right now because he is very elusive and would be hard to track down and find evidence of? Oopsie, sorry. I don't, said Jiang Xi. His thin lips curled in a sneer. I simply recall how we treated Nang Gongse and Ye Wangxi at Mount Huang. I do not wish to see such a scene reenacted. Someone who learned from their past mistakes. Thank you very much. We love to see it. This is completely different. How? Sorry, that's me. Someone protested. How so? Retorted Jiang Xi. Yes, the situation has changed. Nang Gongse is dead, and Ye Wangxi lies bedridden at Guiye even now. But did we not force their hands in the same way, telling them that the sins of Rufeng sect must be repaid with their lives? And they arguably had less fault in this than Moran has, and yet they condemned them in similar ways. He turned towards the speaker, brown eyes sharp as a hawk's. Where was Tianyan Pavilion then? Where was justice? Those of Bitan Manor were still furious at Rufeng sect over the matter of the sword manual. Li Wuxin's disciple Deng Zhongming, Karen, Zhang Zhengmen, is biased. Nang Gongse was the heir to Rufeng sect, and every grievance has its source. He has not. Like, if your father killed someone, would you then, and I know this is very much one of the traditional Chinese values of the sins of the father are, or not the sins of the father aren't the sins of the son, but it's the actual exact opposite of it, like an eye for an eye, and being allowed to avenge your family, that kind of a thing. But it's just funny to me that probably if you ask this person, oh, so if your dad killed someone, would that family be right in killing you as revenge? And he would say, no, but I didn't do anything wrong. So how would he most likely have that energy for himself, but he can't extend that same energy to someone else? Sorry, I'm still salty over Nang Gongse. I don't think I'll ever get over it. Zhang Zhengmen is biased. Nang Gongse was the heir to Rufeng sect, and every grievance has its source. Unless all of Rufeng sect is gone, those debts must be paid. No one wants to be the one getting the short end of the stick. Jiang Xi scoffed. That's right. You understand this perfectly, don't you? No one wants to be the victim who can't fight back. Zheng Tongming fell silent. You think this way, Xu Shuanglin thought this way, and Moran is allowed to think the same. Jiang Xi swept his sleeves back. When it happens to others, it's easy to say these things, but when you're the victim of injustice and violence, you see only the cruelties of the world and wonder why you're the one to suffer. So Zhang Zhengmen believes we were unfair and cruel to Nang Gongse and Ye Wangxi, and that the matter of Bitan's sword manual should be forgotten. I love how they're equating a sword manual, and I'm probably forgetting a lot of details. It's been a minute since I read that volume. A sword manual is worth thousands of lives. Not 2 lives, thousands, because the entirety, besides Ye Wangxi and Nang Gongse, the entirety of Rufeng sect was destroyed. Children as old as a newborn infant could have been destroyed in that fire, and they still think they're in the right with this? Do they hear themselves? Okay, sorry. Nang Gongse is dead, Jiang Xi said. Whom are you hoping to pursue? Zheng Tongming exploded. Then my Shizun died for nothing. Nang Gongse was dead, but doesn't Yevangshi still live? She was the leader of Rufengsek's Shadow City. Does she know nothing about the sword manual? Everyone fell silent. Jiangxi was notorious for his irascible, I'm not sure I pronounced that correctly, temper, to openly fight with Jiangxi. Indeed, the very smart Jin Tongming did not live up to his name in the least. I'm assuming, oh, of course, Tongming is, I'm pretty sure that means very smart. I think they established it in a previous volume, which is why they're not giving me a footnote now. Jiangxi gave him a look that spoke volumes. On Mount Zhao, Nanggong Se was previously injured when he fought Nanggong Changying. He paused. Back then, he conveyed a message to me through the barrier. What did he say? Jiangxi closed his eyes, the scene rising before him once more. Nanggong Se, near death beneath Nanggong Changying's sword, mouthed each word for Jiangxi to read from his lips through the barrier. I wish for all the wealth of Rufengsect to be spread across the lands, leaving nothing behind. Thus, the crowd looked at each other in embarrassment, the monks of Wubei Temple even more so. They lowered their eyes, hands clasped at their mouths, as their mouths moved in silent chanting. Then Tongming colored. He didn't even leave a corpse behind. All the treasures of Rufengsect were in their secret chamber, he gritted out. Who can open it? Let's be honest, he didn't mean it. Tongming is indeed not very smart. Like, oh yeah, by the way, there is Moran. But I'm not gonna think that through. I'm not gonna think about the fact that the only reason we escaped was because of Moran, and he confirmed that he has the blood necessary to do this. But you know what? I'm not even gonna be indignant about it. Serves you right to not be able to get to the treasure because you're too much of an idiot to just think things through. Let's be honest, he didn't mean it. Nanggong Se didn't think he would die in such a way, replied Jiangxi. Also, I'd prefer to believe that his dying words were sincere. Yeah, because you're giving people the benefit of the doubt, which these jerks clearly do not understand. Jin Tongming's mouth wobbled. It took him a moment to retort, "This is why Jiang Zhengmen is taking Mo Yi aside? You want leniency so you don't have to see a second Nanggong Se? I merely think that true justice is difficult, perhaps impossible, to achieve. I hope that those of you passing judgment on others don't put yourself too high on a pedestal. Do not assume that you represent all that is good or righteous." He cast a glance at Tianyan Pavilion. Even the highest court is not infallible. Case closed. Can we leave? At least Xu Jingyong lifted his head. He looked exhausted, as if he didn't know how to face Moran. But although he hesitated, he still spoke. Jiang Zhengmen is right. There have been many conflicts over the years of trouble in cultivation realm. Every sect has done things they're not proud of. Who can decide what's true or fair? To be honest, he sighed, closing his eyes. To be honest, we do limit murder to killings done by one's own... Do we limit murder to killing done by one's own hand? How many innocents were killed by Rufengsect's decision to raise the price of food? I've lived more than 40 years and achieved little of note. But what I did wasn't in pursuit of ascending to immortality or leaving my name in history. I just hoped to lessen some of the suffering in the world. His eyes dulled. The leader of Shizun Peak No matter how he tried to stay composed, was still stunned by the revelation that the child he'd raised was not his kin. I just wanted there to be less suffering, he murmured, even for just one person. Can we give him a hug? I think he needs a hug circle right now. Xu Zhengmen is magnanimous, Mu Yanli said, her tone once again icy. But have you not considered how your leniency towards a criminal is an act of disrespect to the innocent civilians he harmed, and an offense to those mortals who had no part in his crimes? Hilarious that she's like the innocent civilians, but we just 2 seconds ago questioned whether or not these civilians could truly be classed as innocent. And I get that if you start passing things like that, it becomes, as Jiang Shi said, very difficult to actually discern right from wrong. But it's also just so odd to me that Tianyan Pavilion is not taking any responsibility for the massacre at the what was the god who created the weapons? That lake did not seek any retribution for that. They did not come and investigate for that. They did not investigate anything to do with the Feather Tribe. They didn't actually seem to be keen on investigating things regarding Mount Zhao. It was only once they had an easy face to pin the blame on that they decided to grace us with their presence. Tianyan Pavilion does not have the power to account for every wrong under the sun, to punish everyone by law, but we can make an example of him. Sect leader, please be aware of this. As the matter of Moran was handed over to our pavilion, it will not be hastily addressed. That's okay, you don't have to worry about it. You can leave your thoughts in the comments if you want to do a rewatch later or anything like that. But we are here to keep you company auditorially. Zhi Jingyong fell silent. Mu Yanli turned back to Moran. Mu Gongzi, you've finished your tale of woe and received your share of pity. Why don't we now move on to a different subject? What does the pavilion master wish to discuss? Asked Moran indifferently. You said the incident where the tofu seller's daughter was disgraced and died was not your doing. I believe you, but there is another death you cannot be excused for. Moran closed his eyes. The pavilion master is certainly thorough. Let's hear it, Mu Yanli replied coolly. How did you kill Mu Nian, Xu Junzhe's real nephew? Enough! A furious shout cut her off. Shu Meng stood with teeth gritted, eyes shining with tears and hatred. Shut up! Mu Yanli shot him a glance. Attempting to avoid the subject, she pronounced, disappointing to see from the darling of the heavens. She was answered by Long Chen's shrill cry of warning. The scimitar flew by her face and into the column behind her, sending splinters raining down. I live for you, Shu Meng, but I'm so scared for you as well. Like, yes, give us him being protective of Moran, but at the same time, what if this causes more problems? Yanli didn't flinch or even blink. Her beautiful eyes pinned their frozen stare upon Shu Meng. Shu Meng clenched his jaw, muscles twitching in his face. Real nephew this, fake nephew that. Have you had enough? He strode forward and yanked Longcheng out of the column, his chest heaving. He didn't look at Moran or anyone else. He resembled nothing as much as a trapped beast driven insane where he stood, driven to despair. Have you said enough? Have you had a good time? Had your fill? Mangar. Madame Wang sighed. Shimeng ignored her. He looked around with scarlet-rimmed eyes, gripping Long Cheng's hilt. Seeing Zongshi become a murderer, he said mockingly, both himself and the audience objects of his scorn. Watching the brothers of Shizun Peak turn on each other, watching a member of a family become enemies, you're enjoying yourselves, aren't you? I mean, he's not wrong. His voice was so hoarse it whistled in his throat, each syllable shivering into the air. Did you really come here for justice? For the truth? He paused, teeth gritted. Or was it for your own personal petty vendettas? Zhang Shi narrowed his eyes. Young Master Xue, you forget yourself. Shimeng rolled on him with eyes like flames. What gives you the right to rebuke me? Mengar. Xu Jingyong reached out to pull Shimeng back, but froze upon touching him. Shimeng was furious, but his entire body was trembling fit to shatter. I don't want to hear it, he bit the word out. It's all fake. All wrong. You're all liars. Checked. Shimeng, please. I feel like he needs it. Before Xu Zhengyong could try to speak to him, Shimeng had already shoved his way through the crowd and out of the loyalty hall. Throughout it all, he never once turned to look at Moran. In fact, Shimeng knew perfectly well what the truth was and who the liar was. But there were many things in the world that were easily known yet impossible to accept. Shimeng had lived 2 decades in carefree ease. He'd never experienced any devastation besides Chuaning's death. His easy life meant he was still in many ways like a child, yet this was only to his detriment. One like a child would have a child's pure heart, but would also have a child's naivete, recklessness, and brash temper. Xu Jingyong stared in the direction Shimeng had gone for a long moment before slowly sitting back down. The time of his youth was long past. He was nearly 50, and white had begun to feather his temples. He didn't know if he could endure what was to happen. He had to sit down. This at least would allow him some small measure of composure. Liani's face seemed chained in frost, devoid of any warmth. She cared about the matter at hand and nothing else. Moye, will you speak, or should I find another witness? Moran was as calm as any prisoner on death row. No need, he said. If there are any witnesses still alive, I don't wish to see them. He slowly looked up. Weak sunlight streamed down upon his pallid face. I'll tell you myself. At a gesture from Wu Yanli, Tianyan Pavilion's servants brought a chair. She sat down with a flourish, resting her chin in one hand in preparation to attend to his tale. Proceed. Moran closed his eyes and drew a breath before beginning. It started with a businessman. Who? He hesitated. I'm sure many of you have heard of the investigator's market. Ma Yun of Taobao Estate knew this business best. He raised a hand. Oh yes, our sect works closely with these investigators. They roam the cities, making their living investigating old stories and events of the past. That's right. Back then, Uncle was looking for his brother's orphan. He engaged just such an investigator. Xu Jingyong said nothing. Of course he remembered this. They'd found Moran using the information provided by the investigator, who told them only one boy survived when the House of Drunken Jade went up in flames. I love how we kind of just skipped over that, but I don't know if it's because they already told us and I forgot it, or if they didn't tell us because they assumed we could infer what happened. He still remembered the look on the man's face as he exclaimed, "What God-given luck! That your brother's son survived such a calamity must mean prosperity lies in his future." The investigator accepted Uncle's commission. After a few failed attempts, he found a lead and went to the house of Drunken Jade in search of a woman surnamed Moore. He's a terrible investigator. I love how she was like, "Oh, we've heard enough of your tragedy," and so on, not knowing or ignoring the fact that this obviously leads up to what caused the fire, and just kind of wanting him to skip over it because that's what would have been convenient. And now only she's dragging him back to it. Okay. I'm sorry, I think I'm being very harsh on her because I do not like her. Someone asked. Shi Zhengmin's brother's lover, known as Madame Moore. She was the base-born daughter of a large family. Realization broke over the assembly. Madame Moore, wasn't that the name of the brothel, madam? Someone has a brain cell. Give them an applause. But she sounded like a vicious shrew. She wasn't always so, said Moran peaceably. My mom said Madame Moore had gone through an experience similar to hers, and that she too was to be pitied. She'd had a lover when she was young, a penniless wandering cultivator. He said he was going to the lower town realm to establish a powerful sect, so Madame Moore gave him all her coin and jewelry so he could realize this dream. It was my dagger, mumbled Xu Jingyong. Before this cultivator left, he swore Madame Moore an oath. Once he accomplished his goals, he said he'd marry her with all pomp and circumstance and bring her home. He even wrote her a line of verse. Through the river mists do the pepper notes float. He listens in silence to the goddess on her boat. That was how the investigator later made certain of her identity. Star-crossed love stories like these were by far the most popular fare. The female cultivator sighed. Did the former sect leader of Sishin Peak abandon his lover just like Nan Gongyan? Xu Jingyong's eyes widened. "Nonsense!" he cried. My Gurga was nothing like that. My Gurga never forgot Miss Moore." Tears sprang to his eyes at the mention of his deceased brother. The Shinji elder took up the explanation. "Miss, please mind what you say. The former sect leader lost his life in a terrible battle not long after the sect was founded. He never intended to go back on his word. Before he passed, he spoke often of Miss Moore to the sect leader. He always said he'd seek her out as soon as the sect had stabilized. He and Nan Gongyan were nothing alike." "Indeed," said Moran. "She was much luckier than my mother. Her lover passed, but there was still someone thinking of her and wanting to bring her home. Whereas Nan Gongyan was still alive, but he never had the courage to acknowledge my mom and me." "I see now," another voice cried. "This made you jealous, so you pulled a prince and pauper conceit, killed Madame Moore, and burned down the house of Drunken Jade, so you could pass yourself off as the real goods." Projection much? Who knows, maybe Moran will prove me wrong and that'll be exactly what he did, but I think there is more to it. I wouldn't be surprised if Moran and Munyan got into a scuffle because Munyan was trying to abuse him, and then maybe there was a candle involved somehow. It was knocked over, and Moran managed to escape, not realizing that the brothel was on fire and everyone would be killed in the process. Now, that's obviously me giving Moran way too much of the benefit of the doubt, but I would like to hope that that's the case. Uncharitable conjecture, Moran shot the genius cultivator who'd spoken a glance. I never attempted to pass myself off as anything. Unfazed, the cultivator scoffed. Then what was it? Did someone force you to become a young master of Shizun Peak? What was it? Moran found himself wondering the same. So much of this world had once been something entirely different, until a butterfly flapped its wings and stirred a breeze that became a whirlwind, which changed the skies themselves. Just as he'd never intended to take Shizun Yong's nephew's place, Madame Moore hadn't always been that cruel mistress of the entertainment house. She too had had days of gentle youth. She too had once stood at the window hoping for her lover to return. She'd joyfully written to her distant lover about a child growing in her belly, and received his letters in reply. The excitement and delight of a soon-to-be father inked clear across the pages. She'd had all that happiness once. It didn't matter that she was base-born. It didn't matter that people mocked her because her man was a nameless cultivator. It didn't matter that she was pregnant out of wedlock. Someday he would make good on his promise and come in glory to bring them home. She believed this faithfully. But as the days wore on, the letters that had come every 3 days began to come once a week. They dwindled from once a week to once a month, and then there were none at all. Eventually, Madame Moore gave up hope. She was a willful young woman. She'd hidden her relationship from her parents, and after she had the child, she'd hesitated for ages before bringing the boy home. When she finally worked up the courage, her father flew into a rage, and the mistress of the house heaped abuse upon her. Furious, Madame Moore ran away from home. The years flew by, and the young woman became the madam of the House of Drunken Jade. Such were the ups and downs of fate. Life was like a furnace. Some who entered its tempered flames would emerge entirely unrecognizable. Oh, what a line! Let me reread that, because damn. Life was like a furnace. Some who entered its tempered flames would emerge entirely unrecognizable. Moran had experienced this firsthand, and so too had Madame Moore. When the investigator found her at last, it had been 14 years since those days of her girlish youth. The man Shizun had hired helped himself to a seat in the entertainment house. Snapping open his fan, he smiled. "Where's the madam? Call her over." She arrived wearing a jacket patterned with peach blossoms and a shawl of yellow silk. Peeking through the doorway with a pipe in hand, she lifted the tinkling bead veil and tittered. "Hello, Gongzi. Here for music so early in the morning? Do you prefer the papa or the young Qin? My girls are skilled in all manner of instruments. As the first customer of the day, I'll be sure to give you a good price." This was the nature of life. When her lover had left 14 years ago, she'd sat by the bead veil with tears on her lovely cheeks, watching him leave. 14 years later, when her lover's brother finally found her, the veil of time was brushed aside once more. She pushed away the dangling jewels to reveal a face marked by time. That maiden bashful as a doe was dead and gone, and the one in the position of command in the House of Drunken Jade was a sly-eyed matron with a long-stemmed pipe in her hand. The investigator didn't care much for sorrow, only money. Fanning himself, he smiled. "No, thank you. I've come to ask the madam about a certain person." The woman's smile stiffened. "A certain person?" she asked, tone cool. The man clearly enunciated each syllable of the words he had memorized. Through the river mists do the purple notes float. He listens in silence to the goddess on her boat. Before he'd gotten halfway through, Madame Moore had paled. By the time he finished his recitation, she was white as paper. Her lips quivered. Her sharp brows twitched as she clutched a handkerchief to her chest. Who are you? The investigator smiled. If I'm not mistaken, I found Shu Xianzhang. I think Shu Xianzhang's the right person. Madame Moore, how have you been? Madame Moore swayed and sat heavily on the round stool before the table. She gasped for breath, face flushing, then going bloodless once more. When she recovered, she sent everyone away, leaving only the investigator in the hall. She stared into the man's face, eyes shining with joy, grief, and everything in between. The investigator was unbothered. He lifted the pot of tea and poured her a lukewarm cup, then passed it over. Have a sip. She picked it up with trembling hands, taking one sip, then two. Even after finishing the cup, she sipped on nothing before looking up. Did Shulang send you here? The man sighed. Unfortunately, the Shu Xingjun you speak of has long since passed. What? It was his younger brother who sent me on a search for his lost lover. More than a decade ago, the Shu brothers went to the lower cultivation realm to found a sect. Their fortunes rose, and they were no longer those helpless wandering cultivators anymore. But because Xianzhang was crucial in building up the sect, he couldn't step away, and when he was on an exorcism mission, he didn't need to finish. Madame Moore buried her face in her hands and burst into tears. This investigator consoled her for a long time before she managed to muster herself. Before Xianjun passed, he spoke often to his brother about you. All these years his brother has been looking for you, in hopes of finding you and bringing you home. Madame Moore grasped the investigator's hand, mumbling in disbelief. Say those words again. I refuse. I won't believe he's dead. Those words were the key to this whole enterprise. The investigator spoke them easily. Through the river mists do the pippa notes float. He listens in silence to the goddess on her boat. Tears swam in Madame Moore's eyes. He didn't come back for me because, and I thought, I blamed him. The investigator sighed. It's been so many years, madam. Please rest easy. By the way, do you happen to have a son? Yes, I do. Madame Moore wept harder, mopping her face as she called up the stairs. Nian, Nian, Mo Nian, hurry, come downstairs. Interesting. There's something missing here. I'm sure we'll find out in a moment. But the fact that apparently the investigator not only had the chance to speak to Madame Moore, but he also knew very clearly the child's name. And yet he deceived Xu Jingyong into believing that Moran was Monien. Is it because he wouldn't have gotten paid otherwise? Interesting. Okay. come downstairs. The door opened, but the boy who emerged was not Moran. It was a scrawny child holding a pile of dirty laundry, poking his gaunt face from behind the clothes. Cuts and bruises marred his cheeks, and his eyes were smudged with exhaustion. The investigator hesitated. Is this your son? Ah, no. Wiping her face, Madame Moore answered, This is just one of our kitchen boys. Relieved, the man smiled. I see. Madame Moore turned. Moran, where's the young master? Okay, so that's the end of the chapter before we find out what the heck happened to Moran. So the next chapter is 261 and it's called Stain of Crime, which does not sound promising. But because we are 4 minutes away from the hour, I think it's best to pause here, do a 10-minute break, and then come back for the rest of the read along. So we will be back at 6-ish past. Okay, sorry, I am late coming back. Juliet was being absolutely chaotic. So I hope she's calmed down now, but if she starts barking and going crazy again, I might need to just randomly jump off for a second and go sort her out and then come back. So sorry about that. I hope the audio is still okay. I think everything should be working. Okay. So again, for anyone who is maybe following along with their own copies, we were at the top of page 211. Finally into the 200s, we have, let me just double check it, I think 316 pages? Yeah, 316 pages. So we are very slowly making our way through, but yeah. Okay. At this point, Master Shinjing of Wubei Temple sighed. I always struggle to say this, Amitabha, I'm not sure. So, Mo Gongzi is indeed not Xu Zhangmen's nephew. Bitter fate. I did, I'm sorry, I was like jogging to get back here. Sorry about that. I promise I will remember, I will make a note to remember to bring it, when are we here again? Next Monday, if I can do that. Otherwise, once we're back from holiday, which will be middle of October, and then I'm gonna get at the end of October. We shall see. Maybe I should just post a photo on the community tab. Okay, quick question as well. There's a feature on YouTube these days where you can have a community tab that's not the current community tab. It's one where you guys get to like post and interact if you want to. And I have been unsure on whether or not to turn it on because it's a feature that you have to enable. So let me know if you guys would be interested in me enabling that feature. And also, what was the other thing that I wanted to ask? Oh no, I just wanted to mention we might be doing a stream next Monday if I can, but otherwise next Tuesday there won't be a stream because we have guests over, so... Okay, someone in the crowd had connected the dots. Ah, so it was him then. A nearby cultivator didn't understand. Who? The boy who came up with the idea of locking Moran in the dog kennel. The boy about Moran's age. Madame Moore's son. These people need a frickin' map to get there. As if experiencing an epiphany, the man slapped a hand to his forehead and cried, I see now. You killed them and took his place not out of jealousy or greed, but because you held a grudge against him. This logic made sense to many in the crowd, who turned looks of both scorn and pity upon Moran. That lines up. Ah, of course, even the despicable have reason to be pitied. Wu Yanli cleared her throat, and the murmuring settled down. Mo Gongzi, I heard you were starved and abused at the house of Drunken Jade, and that the madam beat and swore at you. Is that true? Yes, Moran replied. Then her son was that boy who locked you up in a kennel, correct? Yes. The guesses of the crowd were confirmed. The murmurs swelled again as they nodded to themselves. See, of course his motives came out of that grudge. He must have hated them both. None of the pots are like realizing that they're as black as the kettle, and the irony is strong. They were right. How could Moran not hate them? Wen Yan was his own age, but much healthier and stronger. No one dared raise a hand to him because he was the madam's son. The boy had been cruel since he was little, and Moran was his favorite punching bag. Whenever he got into trouble, he made sure Moran took the fall. Moran was framed for all sorts of nasty mischief Wen Yan caused, but Moran was an extremely obedient child. Despite his suffering, he never dared take revenge on young Master An Yen. He was only given one flatbread a day, as it was. If he spoke up, that single mouthful of food might be taken away from him. Oof. It didn't matter if he was beaten or wronged. He never said a word. When he truly couldn't take it anymore, he'd curl up in the woodshed where he slept to sob quietly. Even there, he couldn't make too much noise. He was sure to be beaten again if he woke anyone up. "Did you hate them very much?" asked Muyanli. Moran looked up, disdain in his eyes. Who wouldn't? But your surname was given to you by her. If you despise her, why didn't you change it? Moore was the adopted name used in the House of Drunken Jade. Lots of servants sold to the house had that surname. We called Madame Moore Mother or Ma'am. Everyone did it, so I got used to it. No point in changing my surname. And did she treat all of you so poorly? No, but she'd never liked me, and after I let Shizun go, she couldn't stand the sight of me. How poorly did Madame Moore treat you? It was an easy question. In all the years Moran spent in the House of Drunken Jade, the only time he was allowed meat was on New Year's Eve, when he could gnaw on a half-eaten piece of grizzle that a patron left behind. On any other day, he only ever had the single flatbread. He was always given the hardest work, and the slightest mistake earned him a whipping. But he didn't want to say all that. "I'd rather not talk about it," he replied simply. "That's fine. Let's talk about something else. She treated you poorly. When she asked you when Moran was that day, did you lie? Had you already begun to scheme to take Moran's place?" "No," said Moran. Of course he wouldn't dare to. His shelter, food, and safety were all in the madam's hand. The young Moran had reacted to her question like a dog accused of being hit. Flinching, he whispered, "Yan Gongzi went to his lessons." Madame Moore had no illusions about her son. She knew this was impossible. That boy hated studying. It was vastly more likely he'd gone off on a wild lark somewhere. But the investigator was right there, so she only cleared her throat and nodded. "Oh, that child of mine is so mature. Look, sir, he's gone to school again." The man laughed. "Ah, a studious child is a blessing. How about this? I'll write a letter to the sect leader of Shizun Peak and call him here. He'll meet the boy soon enough. There's no point in rushing things now." Madame Moore rose just to fall down to her knees in front of him, overwhelmed with emotion. "Thank you, sir. Even in future prosperity, I will never forget what you've done for us." When the investigator had left, Madame Moore sat in a daze for a long time, lost in a fanciful thoughts and old sorrows. "I had a thought. It's interesting to me because there's a lot here that makes me think that Moran is taking on more guilt than he actually deserves, and again, maybe I'm just hoping for too much. But the fact that, what was it here? There was something, now I've hit a blank, but Moran was accused of something and then clearly stated that, in his mind, stated that he hadn't actually done any of it, and yet he never communicates that. He just kind of takes the blame on. And I'm scared because it feels like that is gonna be his downfall. Whereas if he had clarified certain things, maybe the punishment that he is gonna receive, if he does receive it, Can you tell I'm still holding on to hope that there's gonna be a loophole? But would be lighter. Every so often, she'd burst into laughter or tears. Hours passed before she noticed Moran watching her fearfully from a corner. Perhaps it was because she saw her own shame in Denihan's past, or the simple fact that Moran had dared to set her golden goose free. Regardless, Moran's impression of her was correct. She disliked the boy, and her resentment had grown more intense over time. "What are you looking at?" she said, glaring at him. Moran lowered his long lashes. "Sorry. You said that, but I bet you think my laughing and crying is ridiculous, don't you?" Moran said nothing. His meek obedience made Madame Moore shoot him a glance and a sneer. "Forget it. I won't bother with you. What would you know anyway? Faithfulness, ungrateful." I'm not gonna say that word. It's interesting to me because I can't help but wonder if there were times where I was about to say where Moran took the fall for Munian, but we did get basically confirmation that that had happened multiple times. He was used to such epithets from her. Silent, he kept his head down. "Don't just stand there. I'm in a good mood today. I won't beat you. Go find Nian Gongzi. Don't try and fool me. I know he's not at his lessons. Bring him home. I have something important to tell him. Hurry." Oh, that's what I wanted to say. I wonder if Mo Nian didn't maybe get hurt while he was messing around with something, and then when Moran came back to report on it, Madame Moore blamed him and locked him up in somewhere where he was away from the fire when it ended up happening, and that's how he survived. And maybe he, for some reason, feels responsible. I'm so desperately trying to make it so that Moran is not actually responsible for Monian's death. At the mention of the young master, Moran couldn't help flinching again, but still he nodded and mumbled, "Yes, mother." "Don't call me that anymore." Madame Moore wrinkled her nose. "Soon I'll be out of house of junk and jade. Forget it. I've said enough to you. Hurry and go." That evening, Moran apprehensively set out to look for Nian Gongzi. He didn't know if he'd rather find the boy sooner or later. The young master was certain to yell at him for ruining his day just as soon as they crossed paths. But if he went back empty-handed, Madame Moore was sure to do the same over his incompetence. His slight silhouette wandered helplessly through the fading light. At that moment, Moran had no idea he and Nian Gongzi would swap places. He looked hither and thither, just as he was told. He went to every one of Nian Gongzi's regular haunts, the riverside, the gambling hall, the brothel, the cockfight ring, only to be chased from each with derision. Finally, after asking around, he learned that Nian Gongzi and his friends had gone to an old mill on the outskirts of the city with a large sack in tow. I'm too morbid. Like, my first thought was like, please tell me that's not a body. Moran thought nothing of it before rushing off. The mill had been abandoned for years, and the only landmark nearby was a cemetery. Very rarely did anyone come here. Moran jogged the whole way, but before he reached the building, he saw a group of half-clothed youths scrambling from it. Unless this is the girl that was murdered, that was put on Moran. Okay, let's just keep reading. Before he reached the building, he saw a group of half-clothed youths scrambling from it. Nian Gongzi was in the lead, still pulling up his pants. Gongzi, mother wants you home, Moran hastily cried. She says. His voice died in his throat. There were expressions of terror on the boys' faces. Some were in tears, shaking as they cowered at the side of the group. Moran froze. Years of abuse had honed his instincts for danger. When he saw Nian Gongzi staring fixedly at him with red-rimmed eyes, Moran's hair stood on end. He whirled around and ran. Nian Gongzi reacted quickly. "Grab him!" he shouted. How could Moran have been a match for them? The other boys had him pinned in a moment and dragged him before Nian Gongzi. "What do we do?" someone whispered. "Nian, we're in big trouble. It's too late to run. This brat saw us. Why don't we—" Moran had no idea what they were talking about, but the youthful faces around him were all dark with malice. This was his earliest impression of the word monster. Nian Gongzi narrowed his eyes. He was the calmest and cruelest among them, and after some thought he said, "Don't kill him." Moran's head jerked up. Kill? They'd beaten him, cursed him, and abused him, but he'd never imagined he would hear the word kill from the mouths of a group of teenagers. His mind went blank. "Lock him up in the mill," Moran said. The group exchanged glances. One boy with a pinched and narrow face was the first to catch up. Eyes shining, cheeks red, with snot still streaming from his nose, he exclaimed, "Yes, what a good idea!" He looks so pitiful and helpless right now. It's crazy to think he'll become the ruthless Tash engine later. Yep. One by one, the others also saw his intent. "Ah, I get it. Onion, you're a genius." Moments ago, they had looked at Moran as if he were their ultimate enemy. Now the eyes pinned on him were those of starving wolves eyeing a fattened lamb. The boys shoved Moran into the mill. He pounded on the door with both fists, thrashing, but it was swiftly barricaded shut. There was no windows. The only light came in through the cracks between the wooden boards of the walls. "Let me out!" he yelled. "Let me out!" Someone outside cried, Report him right now! Hurry up, we'll keep an eye on him. You guys go run and tell the officials." Moran shouted and pounded on the door, but it was no use. He let his hands fall, turning around dizzily. In the thin bars of light, he saw the room's other inhabitant, sprawled upon the ground. Okay guys, I hope you are ready for this, because I have no idea what to expect, but I'm assuming it's not going to be pleasant. It was a girl with familiar features. Upon further thought, he realized she was the daughter of the tofu seller on the eastern street, whom Nian Gongzi had been pursuing for some time. Her clothes were torn away, leaving her body bare on the ground. Her limbs were askew, her skin mottled with purpling bruises, and between her legs innocence is the ironic word of the day. Let's just go with that. She'd been raped to death by these beasts. The tears on her face had yet to dry, and her wide, sightless eyes stared blankly at the doorway where Moran stood. It took Moran a moment to understand. When he did, he screamed. His back hit the door with a thud, his pupils contracting as he finally grasped what they had done and what they were going to do. After being rebuffed, Nian Gongzi had come up with a terrible plan for the girl. She was a soft target, weak-willed, and from an unimportant family. What do you mean weak-willed? Obviously she wasn't weak-willed if she rebuffed him and kept on rebuffing him enough that he decided, oh, rape and murder is a good idea. He and his friends had tricked her and dragged her to the mill, where they had taken turns defiling her. The girl was frail to begin with, and the brutes were so rough with her that she died partway through their fun. No, no, Moran cried. He turned, crazed, slamming against the doors. Open the door! Open the door! It wasn't me! Open the door! As if in answer to his prayer, the mill doors opened. Moran tried to run, but the boys grabbed his wrists and pinned them. Once again, Nian Gongzi led the group. Nearly forgot, he said mercilessly. You have to look the part. He directed the boys to rip off Moran's clothes, then smeared blood and fluids from the girl's corpse over her skin. I am so excited. Please read all the sarcasm in my voice right now. So excited to see how all these people in Loyalty Hall are gonna justify that it's okay that Nian Gongzi did this. He still didn't deserve to die at all, you know? They're probably gonna fall back on like, oh no, but all the other innocent people in the brothel didn't deserve to die. And it's like, yeah, but now you're moving the goalpost. If that was the issue from the start, then keep that the issue from start to end. Don't like keep moving said goalpost. Moran wept the whole time, thrashing with all his might, but they were too strong. Desperation to save their own skins took precedence over all else. They ignored Moran's begging and sobbing, their eyes flashing like the eyes of beasts. One of the boys backhanded Moran across the face after Moran bit him. Shut up, he spat. You're a murderer, a rapist. With so many witnesses, how could you possibly defend yourself? It wasn't me, it wasn't. But what could he do? They roughed him up and threw him in the mill, locking him in with that dead girl's naked body before running off to falsely report the crime to the officials. There was nothing Moran could say for himself. The court punished him with 30 strikes of the rod. Excuse me? Like, obviously, we know Moran is innocent, and I feel really bad that he had to suffer for this, but you're telling me that they thought Moran capable of raping and murdering someone, and all they did to him was 30 lashes? Now, granted, 30 lashes most people would die, but the court punished him with 30 strikes of the rod, leaving him bruised and bloodied, then locked him up to await sentencing. The other prisoners mocked and swore at him, and those with daughters held nothing back as they beat him. One of them was ready to defile him in retribution, and was only stopped because the head jailer wanted to minimize fuss. Oh, how kind. Madame Moore came to the prison the very night. Of course she knew what had really happened and resented her son's base nature. But what use was resentment? A mother would always protect her child first and foremost. I would like to think most mothers would not just wave away their child raping and murdering someone. Greatest fear was that the truth would come out during the hearing. If it came to light that Moran was the real culprit, how would the two of them move up in the world? That's the issue. Great. The investigator's letter had already gone out, and Shizun Peak was sending people to bring them home. She'd waited for this so long, her hair had gone grey at the temples. She and her son deserved that glory and status. Nothing would stand in their way. So it was that she rushed through the night and bribed both jailer and the court officials. Don't look too closely, she'd pleaded. Just make it all Moran's fault. But perhaps her conscience wouldn't let her rest, for she went to the prison afterward to see Moran. She even brought him a bowl of braised pork. It's not poisoned. I wouldn't poison you. I wouldn't, because then they might start looking at my child as being guilty instead of blaming it all on you. Sorry, that's me projecting. Moran watched her from the corner where he was curled. His eyes, so dark they looked purple, glimmered with helplessness and hurt. He looked like an animal lined up for slaughter, upset and fearful, yet docile and despair. Something quivered in Madame Moore. Terrified by her own reaction, she rose quickly to her feet. Hardening her heart and her voice, she said, "You're an orphan after all. It's sad, but no one will mourn your death. I've kept you alive for so many years. It's high time you repay the favor." Moran looked silently back at her. Madame Moore gritted her teeth. "Consider this bowl of pork your compensation. Once you eat it, don't blame me in the underworld. I didn't have a choice either." Ma'am, you are literally making a choice right now. Just because a choice is hard does not mean it's not a choice. Her other skirts, she was gone. Moran had never eaten braised pork. Now that a whole bowl sat before him, he stared at it, but did not touch any of its contents. He knocked it over, watching as the red sauce spilled into the dirt of the cell. The sight reminded him of the blood that had pooled beneath the girl's body. Filling him with revulsion so sharp, he turned and heaved, clutching the wall for support. There was nothing for him to throw up. Moran was fed a flatbread a day, and his last meal had long since been digested. He brought up only bile. That night he couldn't sleep. The blood smeared over his skin had hardened into a shell that flaked into rusty powder at the slightest touch, slowing off onto the ground. He sat in silence. No one knew what he was thinking. No one knew if he was even alive. Huddled in on himself, he slowly came to realize many truths. In that dark and filthy prison, in that cell reeking of bile and braised pork, the obedient Moran died. Born in his place was Emperor Shizun, feared throughout the realm by commoners and cultivators alike. Emperor Shizun at his inception. This was the root of all-consuming hatred, brought to life by the flower of eightfold sorrows. Okay, that was a lot. The next chapter is not a promising title either. It's called Curtain Call, which it might be a fitting chapter to end the live stream on. Depending on how long it is. Okay, chapter 262, Curtain Call. The jail in Xiangtan was old and shabby. None of the doors were secure. The next morning, when the guards were busy calling in a prisoner, Moran seized his chance and snuck out. The first thing he did upon regaining his freedom was to return to the house of Drunken Jade. When he entered the backyard, he saw Onion standing smugly in its middle, freshly attired in black cultivator's robes. His mistakes had fallen upon the head of that orphan Moran, just as they always had in the past. Within a day, he was sure he'd gotten away with it. You're an orphan after all. No one will mourn your death. I've kept you alive for so many years. It's high time you repay the favor. This was their justification for sending an innocent young man to the gallows. How pompous. How self-satisfied. Moran hung back in the shadows, spying on the carefree and confident Nian Gongzi. Was this how it felt to be loved and cared for? To have a mother's protection? Someone to keep you safe even if the sky fell? Moran was the only one whose death didn't matter. That morning, Moran watched Nian Gongzi for a very long time. The boy had already purchased robes and dressed himself up like a cultivator. Only his mother sold the house of Drunken... Once his mother sold the house of Drunken Jade, they would set off for the lower cultivation realm, where he would be a rich young master. He waved a sword around in the yard, surrounded by the same boys who'd framed Moran. Great moves, Onion. You look so good. You'll definitely be a famous swordsman when you go to the lower cultivation realm. I've heard lots about your uncle Shizun Peak these past few years. You're going to be living the high life. Don't forget your bros. That's right, another boy added. Onion, you'd better not forget us. We grew up together, and we've been there for you through thick and thin. Even the death of that little tofu seller's... I'm not going to say that. Even then. Onion was already putting on airs befitting his new status. He couldn't allow anyone to learn of the rape. He whipped out his sword and pointed it at the speaker's throat. Moran killed that tofu seller's girl. We all saw it, snapped Moran. He defiled her like a rabid beast. How many times do I have to say it before you guys remember? The youth held at the sword point shivered. Yes, my memory's bad, I misspoke. Everyone else hastened to soothe Onion's ruffled feathers. It was all done by Moran, a brute in human skin. Yes, raping an innocent girl before killing her, we all saw it. I'll never forget the evil look on his face. They spoke over each other in their haste, adding details to their story. When it came to lies, this was the nature of such people. Repeated 1,000 times, they would begin to feel it was the truth. The young men grew more and more self-righteous, happily absolving themselves of all responsibility. A coward is the most polite word to describe them. I think we could use... There's a few curse words that is not in my vocabulary that I would love to use on them instead. Onion burst into laughter, his sword glinting as he slashed wildly at the straw dummies on the field. Once he had struck them all down, he brandished his blade at the straw and cried, Once I'm a master swordsman, I'll kill all monsters. Punishing something. He hated school and often skipped his lessons, so he stuttered, unable to continue. One of his friends came to his rescue, punishing evil and upholding righteousness, standing for justice, bringing good to the land, having the world at your feet. Onion snorted. You sure know a lot of big words, he said disdainfully. It's ironic that, given half a chance, had Moran actually been killed in the prison, and Munyan had indeed gone to the lower cultivation realm and joined Session Peak, he might have actually also turned into Ta Xinjin. Like, obviously not exact copy, but in the same way that Shimei replaced Ta Xinjin in this timeline because Ta Xinjin took himself out of the occasion. Like, he sounds as if he would have become just as much of a terror, if not worse, or earlier. Having missed the mark, the toady lapses. Sorry, having missed the mark, the toady lapsed into an embarrassed silence. Onion waved his sword once more. It takes power to have everything in the palm of your hand, not a clever tongue. If I ever see a rotting beast like Moran again, I'll cut off his head with my sword. What are you gonna do? Read poetry at him? Huh. He was still laughing when the crisp sound of applause drifted into his ears. Niangongzi, you do look like a young master of Session Peak. How impressive. Onion startled and brought the sword up before him, face paling. Moran? He cried. A dark cloud rolled by overhead, obscuring the blazing sun and plunging the yard into shadow. The youth in ragged clothes, who had arrived without their notice, looked up from where he stood on the pile of firewood. Despite the gauntness of his face, Moran's features were very fine. His eyes blazed, and lash marks from the whipping were still vivid across his face. He hadn't washed since he'd escaped the prison, and blood was caked on his skin. For all that it had Moran's familiar features, Onion felt this face belonged to a stranger. It was the boy he knew, yet there was something different about him. Moran held a machete in his hand, eyes curved into smiling crescents. There seemed to be something sinister in the depths of his dimples, like the swirl of a gathering storm. His expression was mild and yet indiscernibly eerie. Bringing good to the land, having the world at your feet. Wendian Gongzi, future master swordsman, young master of Sishan Peak. Since when have you had such ambitions? What a joke. His smile widened, features warping. This kitchen boy had been meek and obedient since he was small, always obliging and rarely speaking. Although he had been away for a single night, he seemed like a moth that had emerged from its cocoon, glittering with life, his grin brash and wild. In the past, the boy seldom smiled. At best, he bent his mouth into a timid curve. But he'd been driven to madness. The youths shrank back in fear. Onion's hand shook as he clutched the hilt of his sword. He swallowed hard and hollered. Moran, what do you think you're doing? How dare you escape prison? On behalf of the people and the law, I'll end your worthless life today. Who made you judge, jury, and executioner? Sorry, that's me. That's not the book. Sure, Moran smiled. I don't want to live like this anymore. If you're strong enough to take this worthless life of mine, go right ahead. But if you're not. A metallic glint flickered in his eyes as he leapt forward. With a flash of shadow, his machete struck true. The sword in Onion's hand clanged on the ground. An instant later, his head dropped next to it, eyes wide and unseeing. Blood sprayed into the air. The headless corpse swayed for a terrible moment before slumping to the ground. Um, That's like incredibly intense. And it's indefensible. You know, there's the fact that this is what, a 14-year-old casually murdering someone like that is too much for me. Because this is not, there was a struggle, and in a desperate bid for survival, Moran hit him over the head and the hit was too hard and he died. This is, oh, let me just chop off a guy's head. Now, granted, I know this was a rapist and murderer. Fair enough. But, you know, it doesn't feel like Moran is far off from that. Like, luckily he doesn't have the rapist card on his head at that point, but he has now officially become a murderer at the age of 14. That's a lot. That is a lot. That is truly indefensible. Blood sprayed into the air. Okay, hold on, give me a second. I might need to skip this, but it's yeah, I don't know if I mentioned previously, but there was something that happened in my personal life, and I've discovered that reading descriptions that kind of like match it to a certain extent bring it back in a visceral way that seeing things that are similar just doesn't. Um, I don't know what to do. Okay, let's try this and see how I feel, and then we otherwise we might just need to stop here, and I will think on how to approach it, and then we'll deal with it in whatever way I decide in the next live stream. Okay. Blood sprayed into the air. The headless corpse swayed for a terrible moment before slumping to the ground. There was a ringing silence. Blood had splattered over Moran's face. Those tattered rags hung from his form, fluttering in the coppery wind as seaweed swayed in water. When he raised his head, the smile on his face broadened. Eyes blood red, he licked the blood from his lips and quietly finished his things. Then I'll take your head off instead. The other boys were frozen in fear, unable to make a sound. Moran looked at them with eyes like chips of ice. Aren't you all so powerful? Aren't you all great at passing the blame? All so good with your fists, punishing evil, upholding righteousness. Go ahead, come at me. Of course they didn't dare to. They stood shaking, scared out of their wits. This was Moran. The same Moran who was so timid and shy he'd bear the greatest suffering in silence. Moran looked up and sighed. Dragging the machete on the ground behind him, he approached them with slow strides, the point of the blade scrawling a line of blood across the ground. How modest you've all become, he chuckled, blade flashing at the corners of his as the corners of his mouth hooked up. Since you won't make the first move, I have no choice but to do the honors. Okay, we're stopping there because I'm assuming we're gonna get more description of that, and I don't know if I can handle it right now. So I'm so sorry. It's a very unfortunate side effect of personal life. Weirdly bleeding into what you read. But anyway, that was a lot. We will figure out how I'm gonna handle these kinds of scenes moving forward, because unfortunately I don't think it's gonna just stop causing a reaction in me, and I don't think Meatburn is capable of not having people, you know, be murdered and having blood sprayed everywhere and all of that kind of fun. So yeah, we'll have to think of a way for me to approach this in a way that works for you and works for me at the same time. But unfortunately, I'm gonna have to stop here for today. So I hope you guys still enjoyed it, despite all the very heavy topics that we covered in this read along. So yeah, I think Kaylee will post the trigger warnings in the comments for people to have future reference for. Thank you guys so much, and I will see you in the next one, hopefully Monday, but otherwise the week after next week. So 再见。